Just ask yourself, like, why exactly am I doing this thing? And one of the things I like to say a lot to lawyers is if you're looking on the outside, you're lacking on the inside. And again, it goes back to the answers to your questions are not outside. They're not from anybody else. Like they're really within you. You just have to give yourself the time and the space to think about them and let yourself answer them.
I think that's really, really a deep and important point. Whatever we're seeking for always lies within us. If we're looking for happiness, that lies within us. I don't get happiness from the nicer car, the nicer house, or
Right.
even not necessarily the bigger, better job.
Yep.
Happiness really is an inside job, and it's based on, for me, on living in accordance with and towards the values and my passions and what's important to me. That's how I can create my own happiness. But it never comes from outside, it's an inside
Yeah.
decision and choice. Welcome to the Free Lawyer Podcast. I'm your host, Gary Miles. The Free Lawyer Podcast is designed for the lawyer, entrepreneur, or professional who is in some way unfulfilled, stressed, or stuck and is looking for something better. We will discuss various blocks that limit us from achieving the personal freedom that we all desire, but have not yet fully experienced. And we will give actionable steps to free yourself from them. Are you looking to achieve a new level of success? If so, this podcast is for you. Hey everybody, welcome to today's episode of the Free Lawyer. Glad each of you are here with us today. And before I get started with our really special guest, just wanted to let you know, for those of you who are here for the first time, what we do on this podcast is bring you helpful information about how you can practice law with less stress and less frustration and more success and more fulfillment. And that's my goal here. On Mondays, I have a solo episode, and today's Thursday episode, I have a wonderful guest for you. For those of you who have listened before and like what you hear, I would love it if you would leave me a rating and review. It would be greatly appreciated. And feel free to share the podcast with other friends and colleagues. And with that behind us, I want to take a minute to introduce you to Adriana Paris. Adriana has quite a background in law. She's the Director of Attorney Development and Recruiting at Rissman Law, where she oversees the hiring and training and retention of lawyers. But she also has a passion for helping lawyers on her own and has coached and supported lawyers in many ways. And she wrote Rising Lawyer, a great guide for law students and junior associates who want to succeed in our profession. So Adriana, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing awesome. I know you began as a civil litigator, I believe, and became the Director of Attorney Development and Recruiting at Rissman Law. Tell me what inspired your transition from being a practicing litigator to the Director of Attorney Development and Recruiting.
Yeah, so I practiced law for 10 years, but really I would say in my May 7th to 8th year is when I started to think that maybe I didn't want to do this forever. I love practicing. I actually didn't hate it. I wasn't a miserable lawyer. I just didn't really like the way I interacted with other lawyers in a civil litigation sort of way. I wanted to teach lawyers. I wanted to have my interactions with them be more positive and more geared towards learning and improvement and development, as opposed to trying to settle a case or trying to litigate or trying to fight over money, really. So in my 8th year, I started to think what else I might do. And then the pandemic hit, which was for some people a great time to make changes. For others, it was a time to kind of stay put and figure out your next steps. And that's what I did. So it really took me a couple of years after I had decided I didn't want to practice anymore to do my next thing. And for me, the natural transition was to, professional development and legal recruiting, where I still work for a firm, so the environment is very familiar to me, but I'm working in a very different capacity than I did before. So I've now officially been transitioned out of the law for 2 years and a few months.
Well, I can really relate to that. I practiced law as a litigator for 45 years.
A lot
And
longer than me. I
a
barely
few
made it to
years longer
10.
than you. I don't know if you should take that as a compliment or an insult, but yes, a few years longer than your 10. Um, and I liked it. I think most of the time, I imagine if you and I had a case against each other, we'd both be professional and respectful and courteous. But there's always this, I'm trying to beat you and you're trying to beat
Yes.
me.
Mhm.
And can I get a settlement that's well within my settlement authority and feel like I got something from you? There was always that me against you mentality that I didn't mind, but as I matured, which is a nice word for it, I decided, like you, I wanted to wrap my arms around lawyers and help and support them instead of trying to beat them.
Yeah.
Because I also realized how stressful our profession is. And there's so much of a need for lawyers to receive support, encouragement, and coaching. Um, what are some common challenges that you found in your work that junior associates face? And how does your book, Rising Lawyer, help to address them?
Yeah, so I mean, I wrote the book really based on my own experiences. I didn't have any lawyers in my family. Even my path to becoming a lawyer, it wasn't like it was very well researched and well decided. I just said I would go to law school one day, then I did, and before I knew it, here I was as an attorney. And I didn't really have anyone to ask questions of. So that's why I wrote the book. It was almost like a book to my old self, like what I wish I had when I started. And one of my challenges, and I think a challenge that I see a lot of brand new associates struggle with, is for us, this is the first time we are working in an office setting full time. Most of us still are go from college to law school immediately to practicing law without having had a different career. So just knowing how to interact in an office with other professionals, knowing kind of the office lingo and the office procedures, like that is a big challenge. And then the second thing I noticed, and I talk about this more, I think, in my second book than I do my first, but it's a theme to all the coaching and everything I do, which is how do you manage your own time? Because again, when you are a student for the majority of your life before you get to your career, you are told how to manage your time. You know when your classes are, you know when exams are due, like you're just kind of your life revolves around school, and people don't realize how like easy that is until you get out in the real world. And people are still expecting a lot out of you, but without so much clarity about how your day has to go. And so you have to create that yourself. And it's very, very hard for new associates to do that.
Tell us about your second book. What was the title of that, and what was its theme and purpose?
Yeah, so it hasn't come out yet, but
Oh,
it's yeah, so it'll come out this fall. I'm dragging my feet a little bit on the release because I have so much going on. I feel like I can't give it its full attention. But the book is ready. It's basically ready to be published. It's called The Chill Lawyer, which is kind of my whole mantra. And the book is more geared, it's more like a lifestyle book for lawyers. It's not just for junior lawyers, it's for lawyers who find themselves perhaps in a transition period. Again, inspired by my own process and my own transition. And it just goes through kind of how to figure out what you want and how to make the life that you want for yourself and how to use our very precious resource time to make career transitions happen for you.
I know you have a coaching program you call the Chill Lawyer. Uh, what are some strategies you utilize in that program to help lawyers manage their time more effectively?
Yeah, so we walk through a lot of true and tested time strategies, but the biggest thing is you have to find what works for you. People always ask me, they're like, "What is your favorite time management trick?" And I'm like, my favorite one is the one that you're going to stick with. Like that's the one that's most important, is the one that you find that you're like, aha, this works for me. But I will say some things that work for me, and I have seen work for other people as well. Or number one is picking every single day more, the better you do in the morning, the better off you are. But every single day, picking your 3 top items that you want to focus on and trying not to go beyond that, trying not to get too many things in one day because you never get those things done well, but rather focusing on just 3 things and trying to get those done. The other time management tool I have that I believe works for most people, again, not everyone, but most people, is to learn how to time block every day and to time batch the things that you're doing. So instead of running around from task to task, then just finding, 2 hours, I'm going to do this one thing. And then 1 hour, I will do this other thing. And just trying to stay focused on the tasks that you have chosen to do and not get distracted, which is easier said than done. I know this.
Well, they're very helpful pointers. By time batching, do you mean putting off all your answering emails instead of one at a time, saving and doing them all between 10:30 and 11:30, or
Yep.
returning all your calls between that time?
Yes, absolutely. So find tasks that are similar and try to get them done all at once in the same time span. So email is such a good example because to me, reading and responding to emails is one of the most wasteful things we do in a day. And I know so many lawyers roll their eyes when I say this because they're like, well, that's my job. My job is to answer emails all day long. True, but you don't have to literally do it all day long. You should pick
Right.
specific times during the day when you are paying attention to your email, responding to emails thoughtfully versus trying to do them really quick, get them off your plate because you know how that works. You send kind of a short reply that doesn't resolve anything. So then the other person has to email you again and ask for clarification. And then you have to email them again. And it just starts this entire chain where you haven't actually resolved what you're trying to resolve. You're just going back and forth. So
There are
yeah, find
probably
time
some
in a day.
there are probably some lawyers who let their email inbox fill up with thousands of emails. I wasn't them. I had the opposite problem. For me, it was an obsession. And I could be working on getting that motion done. But Adriana, you'd send me an email about that case we had together, and I would drop everything I was doing to look at that email and answer it. And then I go back and I forget where I was. It was
Yes.
really stupid and inefficient. And there are so many benefits to not only keeping emails batched, but also phone calls. If you call me, you don't know when I don't take your call that I'm actually at my desk available to answer it. I could be in a deposition, I could be in a meeting, I could be doing a lot of things. And if I call you back within an hour and a half, no one minds. No one's going to complain about that,
Yeah. And the same is true for emails. I mean, maybe an hour and a half might be too long in some people's minds, but if someone sends you an email, they're not actually expecting for you to respond right away. And truly, if you respond right away, that person, especially if it's a partner you're working with, might be like, what are you doing? Aren't you working? Why are you just sitting there, sending off emails and firing off responses within 30 seconds of receiving them? So
I think that's one of the problems in today's modern practice. When I began practicing law, believe this or not, we didn't have computers. We type things on typewriters, which you may have seen in a museum somewhere, and we put them in something called the US mail, which no one uses anymore. And I would send you something, which now I'd send by email, but you might get it 3 days from then.
yeah.
And you may answer and I get that 3-4 days later. But with emails, we developed this cultural obsession with the need to answer them right away. And
Yeah.
that really isn't necessary. And it makes us very, very inefficient. I know, Adriana, I've found so many lawyers feel overwhelmed and disorganized. They feel like they work so hard during the day and get nothing done. What suggestions do you have for that lawyer who feels so overwhelmed?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is for a lot of lawyers, they don't really plan their days adequately. I think, and I talk to a lot of associates, especially who feel like at the moment they walk in their office, they get bombarded with so many things, and they haven't really had time to triage, right, to figure out what they should do next, or what they should do first, really. So I'm a big fan of spending the last 10 to 15 minutes at the end of your day planning for the next day. And that goes back to kind of setting those 3 top priorities that you want to get done. I like to do mine in the morning before I open my emails, but I know a lot of lawyers like to do them the night before when they're kind of calmed down a little bit from the day and they can think a little more clearly about what's coming the next day. And you have to understand that obviously, especially if you're a litigator, which we were, sometimes your plans go completely haywire and you can plan and plan and plan and have the perfect schedule in place and it's just not going to stick. And that's okay. We're not striving for perfection. We're striving for a little better than 50%, right? Kind of like our burden of proof. We just want to be a little better than 50% and trying to manage our days a little better. And planning and preparing for the day ahead is like the number one thing to do to try to get there.
That's a great pointer. I think so many of us go in to our desk, we sit down and say, okay, what are we going to do? Like we haven't
Yeah.
thought about it yet. And we often don't really make a thoughtful or purposeful decision. So I think planning our day, time blocking, and batching are really, really important. So many lawyers tell me that they have a hard time managing a work-life balance, that work is all consuming. They're at their daughter's softball game and they're thinking about work and looking at their phone and getting emails. What suggestions do you have to help lawyers find better work-life balance?
Yeah, I really think a lot of it is this like self-imposed anxiety. Because let's face it, if you have an important event like a wedding or your daughter's baseball game or graduation or something, you should be okay to communicate that with the people that you work with and then have the expectation that they will leave you alone, right? Unless it's an emergency. And I think that's where a lot of lawyers kind of miss a ball is they start to believe that everything is an emergency. And so they're constantly looking at their phones. And it's almost like if you just believe that everything is an emergency, the moment you get an email, you're like, oh yeah, that's an emergency. And of course, most of them are not. So I think it's almost you have to like rewire your brain a little bit to kind of understand that like, yes, even if you're a litigator, not everything is an emergency and not everything needs your attention right now. And I think the more you can start to understand that your time off is not only necessary, but it's deserved. And you should take that time off and spend it with your family and focus your attention on them and try to distract yourself or try to divorce yourself from your job just a little bit. I think that makes the life better for everybody because if you're a partner and you kind of practice that, then other associates get to see that. So then they feel like they can do it too. And then slowly but surely, maybe all of us can start to do that, that we can actually disconnect on our vacations. We can actually take time off and not be so like constantly anxiety driven, thinking that something is going to happen at work while we're gone, because that's just not factually true. But our brains have been a little bit hijacked, I think.
I think that you hit on a really important thing, which some people use the phrase setting boundaries, that if folks know I'm going to a wedding and I won't really be connected to my phone, most people will respect that, or they should,
Right.
or if
Yeah.
not, you're not working in the right place. But the
Right.
other concept I've heard folks talk about, which actually has a lot of appeal to me, is you kind of train the people who communicate with you. So we have 5 kids, and some of them, we send them a text, it's like, we get an answer back in 15 seconds. And others, it could be a day, it could be 2. We've learned not to worry about the ones where it's a day or 2, but if the one who answers in 15 seconds doesn't answer us right away, we wonder, are they okay?
Yes.
So we really can kind of train the other party of the conversation. If we answer every text and email right away, they begin to expect it. They think it's okay.
Yeah.
But if we wait until an appropriate time to answer and they don't have a problem with it, then we've kind of gotten them acclimated to how we do things.
Yeah. And I've shared this before with others, but when I was an associate, I had my yearly review with, a bunch of partners I worked with. And one of the partners I worked with a lot, she said that I was one of her favorite associates, that I was so great. And she said one of her favorite things about me was that I always said yes. She's like, Adriana says yes to everything. She's the best. And everyone was like, oh, yeah, great. That's such a good quality. And it took me really a couple of years to digest that and to realize that I was just overly available. Like I had made myself so available to all the partners I worked with that they always thought I would say yes. And when I said no, they were like, oh my gosh, what's happening? Like something must be going on with her. When really there was nothing going on. It is impossible to say yes to everything. And it's not really a good way to live your life or a good way to have a career.
That's
But
how we
that took
can
a
get
long time for me to learn that lesson. So
that's how we can get burned out, by saying yes to everything. And I know
absolutely.
when we come into a firm, Like your firm, we have a desire to please, we want to succeed, we want to make our partners happy, so we want to say yes to everything, but sometimes we just can't. It's just too
Yeah.
much. And I've had a terrible trait throughout my life of saying yes to things that I don't want to do just to please the other party. And it could be work or not work. And then I resent the fact that they asked me, even though they asked me and I said yes.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's really okay to say no, as long as we do it in the right way and give an explanation, maybe look at alternative suggestions.
Yes.
I can't do it today, but I have more time next week. Is it okay if I got started on Monday? Or I can't do it, but maybe Adriana could do it. I think she might have some time or something of that nature. Come up with another suggestion and people will respect that.
Yeah.
Talk about the process of self-discovery you use in the Chill Lawyer and how important and why we help lawyers identify their values and their passions.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is really what helped me figure out what I wanted to do next in my career. And again, I talk to so many lawyers in a variety of capacities. And one thing that they tell me is, they feel like being a lawyer is not the right job, but they just don't know what to do next. And they're always like, hey, what do you think I should do? And I'm like, I don't know what you should do. And, the only person who knows what you should do is you, but you haven't spent any time asking yourself what you want to do. So how do you think you will come to the answer? So I've kind of come up with this process again that I did myself when I was trying to figure out what to do next. And it has a few steps and I list them all out and I have a big discussion in my book, but just to kind of give you a brief overview, the first thing you should do, and this is the easiest thing to do, I think, but it takes some time, is list out, in all the jobs you've had as a lawyer or as a professional, list out everything that you have liked to do, everything you've disliked to do, and then all the things that you can tolerate, but you don't want to do them every single day. And you have to be super granular when it comes to this information because the more things you can put in all of these three buckets, the better idea you will get of kind of like the job you're crafting the job that you would love to have, right? That's the whole point of this. And then the next step is to look at your strengths. And usually the opposite of a strength is a weakness, or I like to call it a not so strength. And take stock of those. Like, what are you really, really good at? And then what are you not so good at? Again, to kind of craft your perfect job that takes into account the things that you are really good at doing and you like doing and minimizes the things that you're not that good at doing or that you don't like doing. And then you take all that information together and you want to write down kind of like a week in the life of, right? But it's your life. And you're just talking about what it would be like to use your strengths to do the things that you like to do. How exactly does that fit in a job for you? Talk about your schedule. Are you working from home? Are you working remotely? Are you interacting with people a lot? Are you kind of doing solitary work? Like all those little things that all of us have preferences like that. Put all of that together and slowly but surely you start to kind of create the job that works the best for you. It's almost like working backwards. Instead of trying to look for a job and fitting yourself into that job, you're basically creating the job that's great for you. And then you just try to find the next steps. Like, how am I going to get there? Do I need to, do I need any more skills or certifications to get to that job? Is there anything I can do today in my current job to maybe have some experiments that take me closer to this job that I really want? And you just slowly start to work from there.
I think that's so important because too many lawyers take the best job they're offered. What's best? The one with the biggest prestige,
Yes.
probably the biggest firm, and certainly the biggest salary.
Yeah.
That's my goal. I want to work with that big firm with a big name and the big salary. And they don't really think about whether that's what they want to do or not. And then they get there and they're not very happy because it's not consistent with whatever their values and goals are. And then they feel like they're stuck because I get paid all this money and I'm stuck here. And what am I going to do next? And I think it's so important when we're starting our career or during our career to really look at what's important to us. Is independence important? Autonomy?
Yeah.
Big firm, big salary, time with your family? What area of practice? Do you want to handle the cases on your own or if someone telling you what to do? All those kinds of things. Just think about what your values are and then figure out what job fits best with that, and then go get it or create it.
Yeah. And start, keeping track of these things. Like write them down when they come to you. When you have time to think, write down these little things because it's so important to kind of keep them written down because a lot of people in passing will have these thoughts of, oh, you know what I really would like to do is like this thing. And then the thought just fleets away and you never give it another chance again and you don't really think about it. But if you write them down, they kind of stay with you and they like marinate in your brain a little bit.
Do I remember you have a background in yoga?
I do, yes. I got a certification in yoga last year. Yeah.
And does that in any way influence how you look at life, look at your coaching, look at your clients that you work with?
I think it does. I mean, I've always practiced yoga, but I think it was really helpful for me to delve into the teachings of yoga. A lot of the yoga teachings are very kind of like existential questions, like, what am I doing on this earth, right? And I think it's helpful to kind of take a break and ask yourself those questions because again, it's so common for lawyers to be rushing all day long and to just go from one thing to the next without asking themselves, why am I doing this thing? Why am I pursuing this? And so many of the yoga principles make you just stop and, kind of take a breath and just ask yourself, like, why exactly am I doing this thing? And one of the things I like to say a lot to lawyers is, if you're looking on the outside, you're lacking on the inside. And again, it goes back to the answers to your questions are not outside. They're not from anybody else. Like they're really within you. You just have to give yourself the time and the space to think about them and let yourself answer them.
I think that's really, really a deep and important point. Whatever we're seeking for always lies within us. If we're looking for happiness, that lies within us. I don't get happiness from the nicer car, the nicer house, or
Right.
even not necessarily the bigger, better job.
Yep.
Happiness really is an inside job, and it's based on, for me, on living in accordance with and towards the values and my passions and what's important to me. That's how I can create my own happiness. But it never comes from outside. It's an inside
Yeah.
decision and choice. One
And
of the challenges,
someone else's happy, perfect life may not be yours. So some people will meet a seemingly happy lawyer and they're like, oh my gosh, what practice area is that lawyer in? I should do the same thing. And it's like, no, that could fit this person because they have done the work and they figured out that this practice area really meshes with who they are. It doesn't mean that it's going to mesh with who you are. So you can't look at someone else's job and say, I should do it because it makes them happy.
one of the concepts I think that could be a challenge in law is authenticity. As a litigator, sometimes we can only be so authentic as we have to keep
Mhm.
our cards close to our vest. We have to argue our case, which is always a one-sided presentation. We can't be truly open and honest and genuine, but I think also it can affect us at our job too, because we feel like we have to conform to someone else's model of what a lawyer in that firm should be. What role for you does authenticity play, both in kind of career choices and job satisfaction?
Yeah, I mean, authenticity for me is huge and it's always been huge, but I did not feel like I could present who I was working as a lawyer. And I've been honest about that. It doesn't mean that other lawyers cannot be their authentic selves and still be lawyers. I just personally did not feel that way. I definitely felt like I had to blend in. I felt like I had to keep my opinions to myself, especially if those opinions were in any shape or form conflicting to my clients, like positions or statements. So I very much struggled with that. And look, I've definitely been more authentic since I've left the law. I think I am a critic of the law a lot of times, and it's come with backlash. I'm sure there are potentially employers out there who might see my LinkedIn comments and be like, oh, we can never hire her. Like she's off and that's kind of the price you have to pay. But I'm okay with that because if somebody doesn't like me for my opinions, like, I mean, they're not going to like me at all. So why would I even try it? But for me, authenticity has meant, leaving a career behind that is a prestigious and respected career It meant having to have many conversations with my parents that are still ongoing about why I don't practice anymore. Why did I go to law school if I'm not a lawyer? Like doing that whole song and dance with them. But ultimately, I'm the one who has to live in my life. I'm the one who has to live with my choices. I'm the one who day to day has to look at myself in a mirror and say, is this what I want out of my life? So I think you have to make some hard choices sometimes, but ultimately, if it serves you and who you are, then they will always be worth it.
And this comes down to what we said before about figuring out your passions and your values and figure out what lights your fire. That's
Yeah.
how you can be authentic as a lawyer. Um, how do you see the law developing concerning kind of personal fulfillment? You know, so many lawyers I talk to hate what they do. They're very
Mhm.
frustrated. And that's not a statistical sampling, but certainly many are. Where do you see the law profession being 10 years from now in terms of wellness and fulfillment and job satisfaction, those sorts of things?
Yeah, I mean, it would be interesting if you would have asked me 10 years ago, where did I see the law profession going? I think I would have had some very lofty goals for it. I think I would have been very optimistic about things being completely different from 10 years ago. And frankly, I don't think that's happened. I think all of us want it to happen. I just don't know that the law itself, the legal profession as a whole, is going to change that much in 10 years. I do think that individually, the younger generation and even us millennials, I think we're starting to do things differently. And I think we're more okay with doing things differently than we were 10 years ago, 20 years ago. So I hope that continues. But really, if you think about it, like, who cares if the legal profession doesn't change? As long as you yourself find your place in it or adjacent to it or outside of it completely, and that's what makes you happy, then I say go for it.
What I find, I agree with everything you just said. What I find encouraging, though, is I've seen transition to where we're actually talking about things such as wellness and job satisfaction. And 10 years ago, those topics weren't really discussed.
Yeah,
But now I think people are focusing on those factors. You know, the ABA issued its kind of landmark report in 2016, highlighting all the problems in our profession. I think it really it shined a light on what's
yeah.
going on. And I think at least now we're talking about it, and hopefully it's more than lip service. That depends on the firm and the location. But I know I've talked to some younger lawyers who started their own firms. They're all
Yeah.
based around a culture of making sure that every staff person is fulfilled, not only professionally, but personally. If they want to run in a marathon, we'll work our schedule around your training regimen. Or you have a unusual school schedule, we'll work our clock around your school schedule, whatever it might be. And I find those very encouraging too.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was exactly going to say the same thing. I think, back in the day, it used to be that a lot of lawyers who started their own firms did so because they couldn't get a job elsewhere. It was kind of like, I just have to do this because I'm not getting a job. I think now it's becoming like the top choice for a lot of lawyers. They're saying, forget the firm. I'm not even interested in working in that environment. I'm going to do it on my own. I'm going to set my own tone and I'll practice exactly how I want. So again, is that the legal industry changing, or is that just individuals kind of taking things however they want and just making it happen for themselves? But I love seeing that.
Adriana, you have so many balls in the air. You have a full-time job where you work with the attorneys in your firm and help them grow. You've written a book, you're writing your second book, and you coach lawyers as well. How do you balance all those competing roles and not get burned out yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's so funny. I feel like I'm definitely working more than I did when I was a full-time practicing attorney. But the work feels so much more fulfilling. It doesn't feel like work. I feel like in all my jobs, all I'm doing basically is talking to colleagues and friends and trying to help them find a job, be better at their job, figure out another job they could have, or manage their time better. I feel like I'm helping them in a way that I never did before as a practicing attorney. And all of that is deeply fulfilling to me, so it doesn't really feel like work. But at some point, I might have to stop doing one of these things because it is kind of becoming overwhelming.
Yeah, I know. I find nothing more fulfilling than working with my lawyer clients one-on-one and seeing their growth and seeing how I can help them relieve the stress that they face, set goals and achieve them, whether it's at their firm or a different firm. It's very, very fulfilling. Adriana, I call this podcast The Free Lawyer because it's all designed to help the lawyers out there who listen to it find a way to live their life where they feel personally free and not owned and controlled by their practice. What does true personal freedom mean to you, Adriana?
Yeah, for me, it means learning how to manage your time and figuring out like what's important to you and how to get it done. And I think that means having to let go of some of the pressures of being a lawyer and deciding for yourself that you can't do everything. Like it's not going to happen. So don't even try. Find a few things that are important to you. Find the time to do those things and get them done. And that's how you get to personal freedom.
Wonderful. Adriana, thank you so much for your time today and for your amazing insights. For those who are listening who'd like to get in touch with you and maybe chat more about how you might be able to help or support them, how can they best find you?
I am the most active on LinkedIn. That's how you and I met, just chatting on LinkedIn. I post on there pretty frequently. I'm always open to new connections. Just find me under my name. I also have a website, adrianaparis.com, but that's probably going to send you to my LinkedIn because that's where I'm the most active. So yeah, shoot me a message, connect with me on LinkedIn, and I would love to talk to whoever's interested.
Well, Adriana, I so appreciate what you do. Your passion to help lawyers be better, be happier, be more fulfilled is so important. So I thank you for that service.
And right back at you. You're doing a great service as well. And I love your podcast. So thanks for having me on. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. And I want to thank all of you who listened today to hear what Adriana had to share about how you can find more fulfillment and freedom in your practice and chase your passions. Thanks to each of you for being here. And as always, please be well, be safe, and be free. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of the Free Lawyer Podcast. Wherever you are listening, if you enjoyed what I shared, please leave me a rating and review. I would appreciate hearing more about what you like best and what topics you might like me to cover in future episodes. If you are interested in experiencing a more fulfilling and a more successful life, please contact me at www.garymiles.net, where you can schedule a free discovery call with me so I can learn more about you, your challenges, and your dreams. I appreciate each and every one of you and have a great rest of your day. Thanks to all of you for your support.